The First Town Meeting, an excerpt from The People of Sparks. The People of Sparks is the second title in the Books of Ember series, science fiction series. The book is set in a not-so-distant future in which war has devastated the Earth. It tells the story of a group of people who have emerged, tired and hungry, from an underground city. They have left their city because they no longer produce electricity there. They find the settlement of Sparks, where they are welcomed and fed, but the town's resources are limited. How long will the townspeople let the newcomers stay? In this excerpt from part 1 of the book, a town meeting is held to decide their fate. So that was the excerpt to give you background knowledge on what the story is about. Starting with paragraph 1. While Lena slept, the 3 town leaders were holding a meeting. They sat at a table in the tower room of the town hall, which looked out over the plaza. Mary's hands were clasped tightly in front of her. Ben scowled, his gray eyebrows bunched together, deepening the 2 lines between them. Wilmer pulled nervously on one ear and looked from Mary to Ben and back to Mary. "They can't stay here," said Mary. "There's just too many of them. Where would we put them? How would we feed them?" "Yes," said Wilmer, "but where will they go?" No one spoke. They had no answer for that question. Outside the settlement of Sparks, the empty land stretched for miles in all directions. "They can go up to Pine Gap," said Wilmer. "Maybe." Mary snorted and shook her head. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "That's at least 2 weeks' walk away. How could these feeble people travel that far? How could they carry enough food with them? Where would they get enough food, unless we emptied our storehouse and gave them everything?" Wilmer nodded, knowing she was right. The people of Sparks knew of only 3 other settlements, and they'd heard from the roamers that these places were smaller and poorer than Sparks. Their inhabitants wouldn't want extra mouths to feed either. The 3 of them gazed out the window and down the moonlit plaza. Filled with strange sleeping people from the city under the earth, 400 of them with no food, no possessions to speak of, and nowhere to go. "What I fail to understand," said Ben, "is why this particular misfortune has happened to us." He paused, looked to the air to his left, and frowned. This was a habit of his. He seemed to need to pause and frown every now and then to put together his thoughts. Wilmer and Mary had gotten used to waiting during these pauses. "I don't see that we deserve it," Ben went on after a few seconds, "having labored as diligently as we have. And just when we are starting to prosper, at last, after so many years of, well, adversity is a mild word for it." The others nodded, thinking of the hard years. They'd been writers. There had been winters, when people shivered in tents and ate chopped up roots and shriveled nuts. There had been years of droughts and plagues of tomato worms and devastating crop failures that meant people had nothing to eat for months but cabbage and potatoes. There had been times when people had to work so hard to stay alive that they sometimes died just from being too tired to go on. No one wanted to go back to those times. "So what do we do?" said Mary. "If they can't stay and they can't go, what is the right thing to do?" The others sat silent. "Well, there's the Pioneer," said Wilmer, "as a temporary solution." "True," said Ben. "A good thought," said Mary, and Wilmer beamed. "So what is it?" Mary went on. "We'll let them stay in the Pioneer. We'll give them water and food. We do have some extra in the storehouse. In exchange, they work. They help in the fields. They help with building. They do whatever there is to do. We'd have to teach them how. As far as I can see, they know nothing. After a while, when they're stronger, and when they know they can better how to get along, they can move on. They can set up their own village somewhere else." And that's where it ends.